all across America and around the world. This is Veterans Radio. This is Veterans Radio.
Welcome to Veterans Radio. I am Jim Fausone. I'm the officer of the deck today. We've got some great programs for you. I think you'll find very interesting. We always want to remind you can find more about Veterans Radio at its Facebook site or by going to veteransradio.net, where we're on the web 24/7. You can find a lot of our podcasts there as well. We post new ones every Tuesday, so you can get a new story, a new interview, something you didn't know before by going to veteransradio.net. And before we get started, we want to thank our sponsors. First up, we want to thank National Veteran Business Development Council, nvbdc.org. It was established to certify both service-disabled and veteran-owned businesses. You'll find out how they can help your business by going to nvbdc.org. We also want to thank Eisenhower Center. It's a brain injury recovery center. Learn more about eisenhowercenter.com. They're located in Michigan and in Florida. We want to thank Legal Help for Veterans. Legal Help for Veterans fights for veterans' disability rights all across the nation. You can reach them at 800-693-4800 or on the web at legalhelpforveterans.com. Contact us if you'd like to be a sponsor on Veterans Radio, and let's move on to our program. We want to welcome to Veterans Radio today Lonnie Gaudet. Lonnie is a Army veteran. He was in from 2009 to 2012, did a tour in Afghanistan, and had a little more excitement than he bargained for. Now lives in Missouri with a great family. Lonnie, welcome to Veterans Radio.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's set this up a little bit. Why did you join the Army?
It was not really something I really wanted to do from a childhood standpoint, but I did have some family members that served, and by the time I got to high school, I had a cousin that lived with us who was a Marine, and it was very prevalent at that time, so I started getting interested in it in high school. Sports was where I had anticipated going, and, certain choices in life choose different paths. So I went into the civilian workforce for a little while first, but always kind of felt like I had a calling. 9/11 was very prevalent during my time, in high school. So, it made a big impact in my life, and, just kind of something that I had an inevitable path of going down, and finally made the decision to do it. And, it was one of the greatest choices I've ever made.
Well, it's always interesting because I know you had a couple of grandfathers who served in World War II. You had this cousin who served, and those, for young men, those are often guys you look at and you kind of have, a lot of pride in their service, and it helps kind of found your base or foundation for why you think, hey, service is an honorable and worthy thing. And it sounds like that's what was going on in your mind at the time as well.
My grandfather, being one of the World War II veterans, I remember seeing pictures in his house as a kid. I remember seeing the folded up flags. He had an artillery shell by the fireplace. There were things like that I can remember around the house, but nobody ever really talked about his service, but that it was something that he did. And they always regarded him as a great man because of what he did. And so that, you're right. It definitely, I can vividly remember those moments. So it definitely impacted it.
Well, and one of the things we do on Veterans Radio is tell today's veteran stories so that it doesn't just go by the waysides like our grandfathers kind of did, because nobody ever talked about it. So that's why we're glad to have you on today.
Very true. Very true. Those stories don't get told nearly enough, and when you do, you're amazed by what you hear.
And what I want to talk about a little bit is not so much what happened in Afghanistan, but what you've done afterwards. But you got to Afghanistan in 2010. And shortly, we all know that Afghanistan was IED central, and unfortunately, you were a victim / survivor of a couple of IED attacks, one impacting traumatic brain kind of injury in September of 2010, and a worse, if you will, in some ways, IED accident in March of 2011, where you lost your right leg. Obviously, very defining moments in your young life, and kind of forced you into reevaluating or figuring out how the hell am I going to get through all this. So, without dwelling on either of those IED incidences, why don't you tell us a little bit of the story?
Well, it's funny that you would word it as one as a brain injury and the other one more dramatic, as I would actually define them the opposite way. The first one, I took less damage, and I had a buddy who lost 3 limbs and another individual who lost 2 limbs in that explosion. And the catastrophe from it was much more damaging to us as a unit. And visually, it was a lot to take in. And I wasn't there, but just shy of a month. And, we got thrown into a real serious situation real fast. And all things considered, it turned out well, but I had to spend some time in Kandahar, kind of collecting your thoughts, so to speak. They want to make sure you're okay to go back to duty. So I had some time to process that ordeal. And then fast forward to my second one, that's when I actually lost my leg. And I don't think that one was as, I think I gained more from losing my leg than I actually lost by, the flesh being taken from me. And a lot of people wouldn't look at things that way, but having gone through what I did and experienced what I did, and over the years, I can't look back on that particular moment and not think that all of it is a direct result of losing the actual leg. So the second incident, funny as it may be, I don't really define it as the more catastrophic one. Interesting.
And you discharged out of the Army in August of 2012, and I assume that period from March of 2011 to August of 2012 was all focused on recovery and rehab and surgeries and all of that other stuff. Tell us a little bit about that, because it's the setup for, if you will, the second chapter of life, which is pretty damn good.
Very true. So I went to San Antonio, Texas for the CFI, which is the Center for Intrepid, for my rehab, which is an amazing facility. If people who are listening, if you don't know about it, look into it. It's great. That's where I did my rehab, and a lot of guys were coming back with pretty much the same injuries pretty rapidly. Leg injuries were common. Guys with 2 limbs missing were more common than we would expect. And then you would occasionally see someone with a triple amputation, and that's pretty tough. So I say all of that because it kind of fills in why my rehab was a bit different than theirs. When I first got there, I was one of the last ones to kind of come through with an amputation. There were still gunshot wounds coming through and stuff, but things had kind of started slowing down as far as the rate of soldiers coming back. And as I'm rehabbing, I was very fortunate. I didn't have a lot of the setbacks that people have. There's HO, which is a bone regrowth. Some people get these extremely painful neuropathies that won't allow them to progress into their prosthetics. There's any number of issues that could arise. And I was fortunate. The only real setback I had was when they removed my stitches. A little part of the wound kind of opened up, and so that had to just kind of heal from the inside out on its own. It wasn't really a big deal. It just slowed it by about 3 weeks. At that point, I could start kind of I could do things before I even got the prosthetic with the wound care still, but I wasn't really doing like super active things. But I was noticing that it's not that I was being neglected at the rehab facility, but there were people that just needed more care, and there weren't enough therapists to do the jobs. So naturally, they would get the care. And how dare I sit there with one leg and complain about someone who's missing 3 limbs needing help? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I never really got mad about it. I just said, well, I'm going to have to do something if I want to do something in the future. And I did have a good therapist. He did help me, but his focus had to be with the ones that needed more care. And he would set me up, get me started, and then he would just kind of leave me to it. And then I don't like sucking at things. So it's very hard for me to do something and just not be good at it. And if I'm not good at it, well, I have to do it more until it doesn't have to be perfect, but I should be able to do it.
It's attitude, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's all a matter of how bad do you want something. And if you want it bad enough, you'll get it. And I didn't want to be stuck in the chair. I didn't want to be stuck not being who I wanted to be in any sense of whatever that might be.
And in your mind, because you mentioned it briefly and it's important going forward, you were this athletic, competitive kid.
Very much so.
And in your mind during this rehab, you're thinking about what I want to do because of what I've done.
Right. And one of the first things that was brought to me while I was in rehab was actually golf. And I had played golf in high school and I like golf. It's not high impact, fast enough for me. I do enjoy the sport, but it wasn't where I wanted to be at the time.
You needed a little more adrenaline pumping.
Correct. I just come back and, I would come back from an aggressive job and I was an aggressive person prior to it. So I just needed to get back on my, figuratively speaking, feet and get moving. So
there's also before we jump into and
Sure.
The secret that Lonnie and I know is that he's part of Louisville Slugger Warriors, an amputee softball team. He and I met down in Bonita Springs, Florida. Got together by an Air Force veteran and a great supporter of all things veterans, Bob Gillette. So I know where the adrenaline and the competition had to go to, but I don't want to gloss over. This is hard both physically and mentally. And mentally, a lot of guys struggle with post-traumatic stress or depression and thoughts of suicide. I mean, there's both components to this recovery, isn't there?
100%. Physically, we can do so much more than what we'll allow ourselves to do because mentally we are weak, and we allow ourselves to think it's hard and to think it can't be done. And from get-go, I never got mad about my injury. It was just kind of well, what next? Like, how do I do from here? And it wasn't. Everybody says it's glass half empty, glass half full. There's always two perspectives to things, yin and yang. That's always true. But you can, and I always looked at the injuries as this way. You can either define the injury or you can let the injury define you. And I refuse to be defined by missing a leg. I was going to show what I could do. I just didn't know how.
Well, one of the things you got introduced to, you mentioned golf, but you also got into softball and powerlifting and things like that. Talk to us a little bit about the softball.
So right before I had started playing the softball, I had kind of started back with Marine. I transitioned out of the military injury. I got hooked up with a former Marine who had started like a CrossFit gym. And it was more than anything, I just wanted to be able to figure out how to move better on my prosthetic. I was not very agile yet. I wanted to be, but I just didn't have it. And he took the time to, and this was, I can't thank the guy enough. Free of charge, he just helped me get mobile. He let me stretch, and he just did so much with me before I even knew I wanted to do any of that stuff. And while I was doing that, I had a whim of someone, one of my buddies from service had actually started playing for the softball team, and I had heard about it and was at a friend's house and saw Good Morning America, and the softball team was on the news channel, and I was like, hey, that's what I was just talking about. And like 2 days later, I get a phone call from David Van Sleet about that very softball team. And what had interested me was that there was a guy who was missing two legs and he was running full speed in the outfield. Like it was.
How the hell's he doing that is what you thought.
Right. I'm like, okay, I've got a prosthetic and I've only got one of them. And nobody told me we could do that. Like, I have not been shown that. And like, how do I figure out how to get there? And then lo and behold, I get a phone call from the guy who set all of this up, who runs the stuff.
Hey, Lonnie, let me jump in here because I want to connect some dots. Please. I want to connect some dots for folks. In this, we're talking to Lonnie Gaudet, an Army veteran who's made the most of everything and won't give up. But along the way, you got to have some help. And you just mentioned a Marine who had a CrossFit gym, and David Van Sleet with the Louisville Slugger Warriors. I mean, in some regards, all of us have to be helping our veterans in whatever little thing we can do, because we don't know where that might take us. And I'm sure none of these guys, got anything out of it other than the joy of just helping somebody out. So as you went through your recovery and got to where you are today, there's a whole lot of friends, family, battle buddies, strangers who have done something that really has helped along the way. Aren't there those kind of people?
You couldn't be more correct. One of my biggest things that I preach to people, because with the leg, and people see that, I don't like to pat myself on the back, but people will come up and say, you're such an inspiration because of A, B, C, whatever the reason may be. And usually the first thing out of my mouth is, no man is an island. I understand and I appreciate that you see where I have gotten, and I respect that recognition. But let me tell you about all the people who have helped me get to this place of peace and excellence, because it's never just me. And that has always been true from the beginning of this process. It's just people that have stepped up when I couldn't figure out what to do next. They just pieced it along for me and got me to where I am.
And you've earned the right to give a little life advice to people who may be feeling depressed, hopeless, I don't know what I'm going to do next. And it sounds like part of that life advice is to reach out and accept that kind of help, or say, hey, I kind of need, I'd like to get introduced to this. How do I do that? It sounds like you're outgoing enough to actually, use that in your recovery process.
Yeah. My wife makes me outgoing enough. She has forced me to become much more outward than I am, because she says that I need to tell people more. And she's right, because
don't admit that. Their heads get so big when you do that.
You know what? She's right, because I was one of those people that was, everybody looks at me and says, that's a tough guy. There's no way he needs help. And I remember going, man, I don't know what to do. I wish somebody would help me. And if people don't know that the guys that they think are, like, I thought I was superhuman. I never thought I could be hurt or anything like that until, guess what? I figured, I might die in war, but I never thought I might lose something and have to figure all of that out. So that was never a question to even think about. So having to relearn all of that is, they don't see all of the backstory. They see the success and they see you keep climbing and climbing and climbing. But there was a lot of times where I didn't want to do it. And she would say, you know what? You need to put yourself out there. And every time I did, someone would come by and say, you know what? Thank you for doing that, because I didn't know that you experienced that and I didn't know how to get past it. But because you did, well, it shouldn't be, I should be able to do it too.
I think you just gave another, or maybe it's your wife who gave another pearl of wisdom here, which is even tough guys need help.
100%. I don't care what they say. No man is an island.
One of the things that you've focused on exercise and sports as a way to get through some of the valleys in life mentally, and to push yourself as far as you can go physically. I know you're in. Talk to us a little bit about what you're doing in sports and in fitness and nutrition at the moment, Lonnie.
Well, currently, it's been a personal journey for myself. Is the fitness side of it. The softball, it really got me going, and it lit a fire in me. But I've got kids, and it's hard to travel and play softball and be for them when they've got a sporting event every night of the week. So things just kind of started to shift, and I started to find the gym as that outlet of. It wasn't the physical demand of the gym. It was the mental clarity I was getting from it. I am a very spiritual, religious person. God has had a wonderful hand on the direction of my life. And I know that's not for everybody. So I don't typically focus on that whenever I have conversations. But you can still talk about the spiritual aspect of the clarity that you get when you do those types of things. So that's what the gym has been for me, is it's a place where I can go and I can work out all of those demons. I can be as angry as I want. I can throw things if I need to. And I can, in a sense, destroy myself and make myself feel like, honestly, it's when I feel the most alive, because I'm doing something that's hard and I'm accomplishing it. And so I've gone on and I've started doing bodybuilding competitions, and I've gotten my personal trainer certification, and a buddy of mine locally has a building, and another friend of mine that I actually served with lives local. And the three of us have kind of gone together into opening a gym for personal training, but it's not really like a commercial gym. So what we want to do is just help people get better. And whatever that means, if it means being able to stand up and walk 10 steps today because you couldn't do that yesterday, well, let's help you. And you've got two veterans that, like, we've just got a lot of life experience, and it's a passion project. So more so than anything, it's been fueled by us just wanting to help people get better for themselves, be better tomorrow than you are today.
So you've mentioned it, and we've danced around it a little bit. I've made a little fun of it, but it's too important to maybe not come back and touch on. And that's the importance for you and for so many guys I talk to, the family, the role of the family. And you got injured in 2012, but or discharged, I should say, in 2012, and in 2020 you got married. You've got 3 kids, 2 girls, a boy. You kind of alluded to all the sporting events. Talk to us about being the dad in the moment for these kids and for your wife.
Well, and believe it or not, we've got one on the way. Due date of February 1st.
Congratulations.
Yeah. It's exciting. But this, ironically, losing my leg has allowed me to step into a role that I never foresaw for myself, as I kind of spend more of a stay-at-home dad role these days with the freedom of schedule that I have with the gym and everything. My wife is an occupational therapist, so she's quite busy with where she works at the hospital. And but it allows me to do things with my kids that I wouldn't have been able to do before. So the injury has provided an avenue, so to speak, and I get to I get to be present for everything that my children do. I run them everywhere they need to be, and they have learned more from me having the injury than I probably could have ever taught them had I not, because I've learned how to be a more patient person. So that translates to them. I've learned how to look at things in different perspectives because of this and because of what I've gone through. So again, these are lessons that, I was 25 learning them on my own, and here I am able to give them give these lessons to them when they're 10, 8, and 16. And it's just hopefully that they'll see the world in a different light and realize that it's not weakness to need help. It's strength when you can rely on others and actually come together and do things. So the family role is not something that I had anticipated, but I don't see how things would be any different. I wouldn't want them to be.
Well, you certainly are, and we've talked about this when we were together. You know, you're really a lucky man. You've got a great wife. You got this great family unit, and you appreciate sort of the rarity or the beauty of that. And I think sometimes it's easy to what do they say? You hurt the ones you love, right? If you're depressed and you're feeling hopeless and everything else, who do you beat up on the most? Well, you beat up on your family.
Yeah, the ones around us end up wearing that more than anything.
And so you're really have gone through this and approaching it and saying, I want to make sure I don't do that.
And let's be fair. I'm not free of those struggles. My children have seen anger from me in moments that don't need to be. Just simple outbursts that can happen just from silly things. But I have to remind myself that it's not fair for them to not understand what's going on in my head. So I try to bring it back to them and explain that, it's never an excuse. And I hope to not sound like I'm making it as one, but that there is something that causes the outbursts, and I have to be better at recognizing before it happens so that I can remove myself from those situations so as to not end up inevitably exploding. And it's a learning process still. So hopefully that they're learning still from that, and they can learn to deal throughout life as well.
Yeah, you got to break that cycle of anger and triggers and know it's a trigger and say, okay, don't let that become the trigger where I end up throwing stuff, or I should save the throwing stuff until I go to the gym.
Give me a second and explain to them, guys, like I'm just, and it's not, I don't mean to say that I'm just screaming at them or anything by any means. Just, we get angry in the things we do, and we get frustrated in the things we do, and we can have these outbursts, and an 8-year-old doesn't understand that. They they see, dad's mad, and it's like, well, I'm not really mad. I'm just frustrated. Well, why are you frustrated? Well, why do you seem so upset all the time? And then you bring it all back to say, well, hey, these are some things that dad has had to deal with in his life, and it's caused me to be in a state of mind that I didn't realize I was getting to. And guys, I'm going to have to step back. I've had to withdraw myself and, not like from a violent situation or anything, but say, you know what, I need to actually go start seeing a counselor again, because I'm starting to notice myself not talking with you guys.
Well, that goes back to what you said earlier, Lonnie, about how, you had some grandparents, fathers in World War II, but nobody ever talked about it. And certainly our brethren from Vietnam era, they never talked about it. And that wasn't the right way to handle it. So I'm glad that you recognize that and are working with that as it creeps up on you every now and again. I know as a family man, you got some obligations coming up. I told you we'd keep you on schedule here so that you can get out and do that. I do really appreciate you being so candid and trying to pass along to Veterans Radio listeners some of the life lessons that you've learned and how you've turned your service and injuries in Afghanistan into real positive stuff, and recognize the help that you needed and the people who've given it to you over the years. So, Lonnie, thanks for spending a little time with us today.
Jim, I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
And I want to thank everybody for listening to Veterans Radio today. I am Jim Fausone. It's been a pleasure to be your host. I'm a veterans disability lawyer at Legal Help for Veterans, and you can reach us at 800-693-4800 or legalhelpforveterans.com on the web. You can follow Veterans Radio on Facebook and listen to its podcasts and internet radio shows by going to veteransradio.net. And until next time, you are dismissed.
If you have a VA claim denied by the Board of Veterans' Appeals, contact Legal Help for Veterans at 1-800-693-4800. They're experts in handling cases before the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims. Their number again, 1-800-693-4800.
We again want to thank our national sponsors, the National Veterans Business Development Council, nvbdc.org, Eisenhower Center, VA Ann Arbor Health Care System, the Vietnam Veterans of America Charles S. Kettles Chapter, Ann Arbor, Michigan, VFW Graf O'Hara Post 423 in Ann Arbor, and the American Legion Presscorn Post 46, also in Ann Arbor. They keep us on the air, as does your support. Go to Facebook, go to veteransradio.net, and support our efforts. And until next time, you are dismissed.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.